presentation is over prosopagnosia. What even is prosopagnosia? According to the textbook, prosopagnosia is the ability to not be able to recognize human faces visually, which means it can become hard for them to also create visual imagery for faces, even though other objects that are not a face may be perceived more normal. The textbook also explains that this is a neurological disorder. As you can see with this image on the slide, it is a great representation of what people with this disorder typically see. Typically, people with this disorder have a hard time being able to even recognize people that they know. They could be surrounded with family members or by someone that they love, and they could still have a hard time realizing that it is their face. This is why they rely on voices when it comes to knowing who someone is and who they are actually close to. Next, we are going to talk about a few facts about people with prosopagnosia. The first fact is, this is a difficult disorder to actually treat. The second one is, people with prosopagnosia typically have high levels of social anxiety. And the third one is, a stroke or a TBI, which is a traumatic brain injury, or even certain other neurodegenerative diseases can result in getting prosopagnosia. All of these are facts about this disorder. Prosopagnosia can also be congenital, or it can even be present at birth without a traumatic brain injury. Most people with prosopagnosia typically also show other signs than just social anxiety, as stated on this slideshow. They also show signs of depression and social withdrawal. In the textbook, it also talks about how people with prosopagnosia can still recognize a chair or a sweater better than they can actually recognize a person's face. This goes hand in hand with the first article, which will be discussed next in the next slide. On this slide, we're going to talk a little bit about Article 1. According to the article, Object Recognition in Acquired and Developmental Prosopagnosia, which was published on March 5, 2019, stated that there are two types of categories when it comes to object recognition of prosopagnosia. The two categories are acquired prosopagnosia, meaning that there are people that can actually identify objects such as birds, dogs, flowers, fruits, and vegetables, whereas the other group of people have more difficulty identifying them along with all these other animals that there are. This also can relate to the textbook Cognition that was published in 2018 by Farmer and Matlin, because both of the textbook and the article have done common case studies to see if people with prosopagnosia can see other common objects, which in those case studies, it was shown that they are able to see the other common objects along with like the blurry faces, as discussed in the previous slides. On this slide, there is a study that was conducted in Article 1. The purpose was to perform multiple different studies to determine exactly how prosopagnosia affects these individuals when it comes to object recognition. This study was to figure out if the stimulus reaction time would fall above or below the 95% prediction limit. The objects used as stimuluses were the cars, guns, horses, and glasses, which are shown on the bottom side of the graph, along with the reaction times, which is shown in the graph on the left-hand side. The prediction limit is the horizontal line on both graphs. I would now like to turn your attention to the top graph. Looking at the prediction limit on the top graph, above that line is considered normal, whereas below is considered abnormal reaction times. Now looking at the bottom graph, it's the same concept but switched, meaning above the line is abnormal and below is normal reaction times. In result, the data was inconclusive with most of the stimulus reaction times besides the guns category, which shows more of an abnormal reading to object recognition than the other three stimuluses. The case of prosopagnosia. Article 2 resembles more of an informative research study than an experimental research study because it lays out the basis of what prosopagnosia even is. The main idea of Article 2 goes hand in hand with Article 1 due to wanting to understand if prosopagnosia is only about the inability to recognize faces or if it also hinders object recognition. On page 4 of the article, Progress in Perceptual Research, which was updated in 2022 and written by Andrea Albanonco and Jason Barton, discusses that in a few cases of acquired prosopagnosia have shown that some people have reported normal recognition, whereas others have shown impairments of object recognition. In other words, some people have shown intact object recognition, while others have shown a hard time recognizing faces and objects. Both articles make you question whether prosopagnosia only has to do with the inability to recall faces, or if it has to do with all the things that you see ranging from faces, objects, figures, and pictures. Now I'm going to discuss the difference between the articles. Article 1 is a research study, whereas Article 2 is more of an informative research study. Article 1 understands differences between acquired and developmental prosopagnosia, while Article 2 is understanding the basis of what prosopagnosia is. Article 2 has multiple research studies conducted, and Article 1 contains more of a self-report questionnaires. The previous article that was mentioned was more of a research study. It was used to understand object recognition in developmental and acquired prosopagnosia. The second article is more of an informative article to give background information about the diagnosis, neutral basis, and if prosopagnosia is only about basis. Article 2 also expresses that being able to understand prosopagnosia is becoming easier with self-reporting questionnaires because you do not need equipment and it can be done in as little as 20 minutes. The downside to using this method is that the researchers are afraid that people may be more modest and not express the full truth when answering the questions. Now that we know a few facts about this disorder and have taken time to review some of the research studies that I have chose to talk about, as mentioned before, prosopagnosia can be very hard to deal with, and being able to know more about this disorder can help other people in need of support. Thank you for listening, and my last slide is just my references slide.